Hello boys and girls and fellow raiders, my name is Nathaniel Highfill from the Society of Amateur Vikings for General Reenactment. So today I want to show you a video on how to make a firebox. As you've probably seen from our encampments, we usually have a box, above ground box set up for cooking fires and stay warm. It's a brilliant tool for reenactment events for any time period, any group. I highly suggest it. So here we are today to show you my design that has been tried and true, tested, and has worked for us for many of events. So let's take a look at all the pieces we have here. We have the sheet metal. We have the bottom support structure and the center support. And then we have the top half. So let's start putting it together. So let's start with the center support. Alright, the center support right here, I actually made out of the leftover scraps out of the rest of the firebox, but it's important to always have a center support. So here I got 2 grooves cut out of each board to lock it in place, like so. Now you don't have to have exactly this design. You can have a cross set up in the bottom. But whatever you do, it's very important to have a center support to support that sheet metal, because when everything's said and done, you're going to have either a layer of sand or a layer of rocks to act as a heat dampener so it doesn't burn everything on the bottom side of your box. So it's going to be very heavy, so it's critical to have some sort of center support. As you see here, we are using a mortise and tenon setup. It's pretty easy to do. What I did is I just cut half or a quarter of the way down on the top and the bottom to create the tongue, so to speak, and then created a hole on the other board so they slide right in. You want it to leave the hole just a tiny bit bigger than the board you're trying to fit it through, because you need to make room for the board to swell with time and the heat from the firebox. So now we got it all the way back in place, and now we need a dowel set up to make sure it doesn't fall off the tongue. So that's why I have this other hole here. I'm going to take this long dowel. You don't have to have it this long, but you'll see why I have it, because now I can also use it to carry the whole box. So this is what the bottom half of the firebox looks like. You see the outside box and you see the center support. So now we are going to put on the sheet metal. And you'll see why the bottom boards look a little different with an extra board. It's to lock the sheet metal from sliding around, as well as the top half of the box when we get to that point. That's why these boards are right here. And for those who wants to keep it period accurate, I did screws from the inside so you don't see screws on the outside. That way it looks legit. Now, as you see, I have holes in the sheet metal. From past experience, bad idea. Dowels don't work when the wood is constantly expanding and contracting from the heat of the firebox. It warps over time. Don't try it. And with that said, let's put on the top. So as you see with the top half, it is the same kind of mortise and tenon connections as the bottom. The only real difference is we don't need that extra board to keep things from moving around, because that's only on the bottom. So again, as you see, it's just a simple slide fit setup. So now that we got it fully assembled, it's time to put the top half on the bottom. Again, this is why I left the dowels long, because they make great handles. All right. And see, now that's about as high as it's going to sit. This is a lot easier than having to bend all the way down to the ground. This is a good 12 inches above the ground to the sheet metal, so it makes it a lot easier for cooking. All right, now we got it fully completed. I want to point out a couple things to you. Now we have everything completed to really show you a few things. First thing you'll notice that I've used 2x12s on the bottom and 2x10s on the top. The reason for that is you don't really necessarily gonna need 12 inches on the top unless you're really gonna have a big fire. You don't, for cooking purposes, you don't need it that big, and it adds a lot more weight and it's a little bit more expensive. And again, I want to point out that on the bottom pieces, I have this board right here screwed into the bottom half just to make sure nothing is going to fall off. It helps lock it in place. Now, another important feature, you probably see the color tone difference between the top and the bottom. I went ahead and I used salt treated lumber for the bottom because it's on the moist ground. I don't want it to rot. I want it to last a long time. But it's very important not to use salt treated lumber on the top. I repeat, do not use salt treated lumber on the top. And you want to know why? Is the chemicals in salt treating the lumber is very toxic. So if you have your cooking fire here where you're cooking and eating food out of, you don't want the fumes from that, all the salt treated chemicals to get into your food, because that's actually poisonous. So non-salt treated lumber is very important for the top. And the last thing I want to point out is from any kind of store, even Amazon sells it, wherever, you want to get a fire retardant spray, and you want to thoroughly douse both top and bottom with the whole fire retardant spray, especially the top and the center support board underneath the sheet metal. That way it will help keep from catching fire. Of course, you got to have your fire extinguisher handy, but that way it will just smolder instead of going up in flames. That fire retardant will just make it smolder and easier to put out, and it'll keep your fire box lasting a lot longer. You want to spray it down before every use. And now it's time to add our insulator to our box so we don't burn up the bottom half of our box. You can use sand, pea gravel, or river rocks. We recommend river rocks for two main reasons. One is much quicker cool down time than sand, and two, it's much quicker on the cleanup, sorting out all that ash and debris. So here we have the final product complete with tripod and everything good to go. Now the only question is, what's for dinner?